The emergence of a brand new distance running star is one of the most exciting things to witness in high school track and field. What's even better, especially for mile fans, is when these kids have the potential to write their names in the history books of the Sub-4 Mile Club. While it's already a small club of individuals who have proven their middle distance capabilities, it's an incredibly prestigious accolade to possess in high school, as it's not just a sign of complete dominance in this environment, but a solid stepping stone that can lead to further greatness in the collegiate or professional world. Each athlete has their own story of how they all managed to triumph past this elusive barrier. So let's take it all the way back to the 60s and tell the stories of every Sub-4 high school mile. In the early 1960s, Wichita native Jim Ryan was far and beyond the best mile prodigy the U.S. high school track scene had ever witnessed. Just in his sophomore year alone, he had went from a 4:32 mile all the way down to 4:07.8 to cement him at the top of the mid-distance food chain just within a couple months. By next year, Ryan had set the half-mile age world record and had set the fastest mark in the mile that year of 4:06.4. Other high school up-and-comer Jerry Lindgren had dethroned Ryan running 4:06 flat, but it was only mere hours before Ryan stepped in and demolished it running 4:01.7, completely beating the new national high school record as a result. This mark undoubtedly put him in contention to break the 4-minute barrier, so naturally he was thrown into an elite field at the Compton Invitational. Despite finishing in last place, the pack was more than quick enough to pull him through to become the first ever high schooler to break 4 minutes in the mile on June 5th, 1964, running 3:59 flat. Not only that, but just weeks later, he would run 3:39 in the 1500, which was a 3:56 mile equivalent, and would even go as far as to make the Olympic team make the semis at the Olympics, but was knocked out during a very tactical heat for what was only his junior year of high school. For the indoor season, Ryan would have to withdraw from this part of his senior year due to injury, but by the time he came back, he was in better shape than ever. At the 1965 Kansas State Championships, Ryan would attempt to pull the feat off within a high school field only. He came through the first quarter in 58 seconds, but reeled it back a bit, running 62.8. Coming through with 1 lap to go at around 3:02, Ryan needed about a 58 for the Sub-4, and as he came through at about 3:30 with half a lap to go, he trusted his kick to run 3:58.3 for the new high school record and the first ever Sub-4 in a high school meet only to go along with it.
We ran the last quarter mile in 55.9, which is great.
Yes, I'm very surprised. Absolutely surprised.
Who did you look back for?
I looked back for Mike to see where he had finished, and I didn't see him at the time, but I eventually found out he finished second.
Ryan wasn't done yet though, as just 2 weeks later, he had beaten his own record again at the Modesto Relays, running 3:58.1, and lowered it even more to 3:56.8, a time that would put him just behind Kiwi legend, world record holder, and multiple-time Olympic champion Peter Snell. Although, Ryan would get another chance to race against Snell near the end of June, and during this race, not only would he secure the win over him, but would end up finishing with this time.
Ryan fights it off. Snell maybe box because Grella is on the outside trying to overtake Ryan. Here comes Snell with a great pounding finish. It's Ryan on the inside. He's got the lead. Snell gets second, and it is Jim Grella third, and Jim Ryan, a high schooler from Wichita, has defeated Peter Snell and Jim Grella in the most amazing.
Jim Ryan, as a high schooler, had run 3:55.3 to also beat Peter Snell in the process. An unthinkable win and a time to put on a high schooler's resume, yet Ryan had pulled out all of the stops to without a doubt become the greatest high school runner to ever live. Following his graduation of Wichita East High School, Ryan would fittingly enroll at the University of Kansas and won a plethora of NCAA titles, but most notably set the half-mile and the mile world records in 1966, only to break 3 more world records in 1967, which included the metric and imperial miles. He then approached the height of his career, capturing the silver medal at the 1968 Olympics, and went on to still have a great career before retiring in the 70s. Just as quickly as one high schooler broke the 4-minute barrier though, another one in the 60s was brewing up just right behind. And that kid's name was Tim Danielson. Hailing from Chula Vista, California, Tim Danielson quickly became a driving force in the high school running scene in 1965, where he ran 4:25, 4:20, 4:19, 4:12, and 4:13 for a near perfect progression in his career. These times would mean virtually nothing to him though, as his 4:08.7 put him quite high on the all-time high school list for the event, and was looking to do big things come his senior year. Pulling out of indoor season due to injury, Danielson wouldn't return to the mile until late March, where he surprisingly came back with a 4:11.2, only to then run 4:06.2 and 4:07 flat come June. Before anyone could properly prepare for a sub-4 mile attempt from him, he had fulfilled this goal out of nowhere at the San Diego Invitational on June 11th, 1966. Unlike Ryan though, Danielson's career moving forward would be stifled with his collegiate and familial endeavors, as his running career served as a second or even tertiary factor in his life, and would quickly drop the spikes entirely. The Cedar Grove native, Marty Lori, was an absolute stud in the mid-60s, tackling down tough fields as a sophomore, as he would run in the sub-420 zone already. He did run a couple times during the indoor season, where he broke the indoor flat track national record, but during outdoor, his times hadn't improved a ton, but nevertheless, had a great season running 4:13.2. Lori's indoor season replicated similar times to his outdoor fitness, but during a Penn Relays anchor leg during outdoor season, he would shock the nation with his 4:04.4 mile split that hinted at a potential sub-4 attempt. Surely enough, Lori would attempt this feat at the exact same meet Danielson broke 4 at, but would miss it by the slightest amount, but would still beat Danielson and NCAA indoor mile champion Dave Patrick in the process. At a stacked meet in Bakersfield, California though, Lori clinged on to the pro field for as long as he could, as the field went out in around 2 flat halfway. After Jim Ryan pulled away from the pack to attempt to break the world record, he would be successful in doing so, but just seconds behind would be the Cedar Grove prep that would become the 3rd high schooler in history to break 4 minutes.
20 yards to go. And 10. We get 350.9 on the clock. What's our other time here? 351.2. It looks like he has not run the 350 mile, but we may have a new world record in the mile.
With this, 3 high schoolers had now broken 4. Lori's career was quite successful going into the collegiate scene, as after enrolling in Villanova University, he had also made the US Olympic team in the 1500. He'd even make it far as going to the finals, but a stress fracture would put him out of contention, placing 12th, but was still the youngest person in history to make the 1500 final. He also won NCAA and AAU titles, was ranked number 1 in the world for the metric and imperial mile at some points, and had even become ranked first in the 5K after setting the American record in 1977. Overall, the 60s were an utter anomaly of a decade for high school milers, but then the 70s came, and the same level of talent unfortunately wasn't produced. In all actuality, no high schooler for over 30 years would be able to break 4. until one kid from Michigan decided to not only chase after this goal, but would become one of the most prolific milers ever seen in high school history. Born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Allan Webb's athletic endeavors would take place in Virginia, where he ran for South Lakes High School. Winning a state title in the 2-mile with ease as just a freshman, Webb was already considered one of the best distance runners in Virginia, and he would go into his sophomore year with a 4:15 indoor mile at the Nike Indoor Classic. Just a couple months later, Webb would be entered into the mile for Foot Locker Nationals and ran an absurd 8.5 second PR to run 4:06.94. He had also replicated this fitness for junior year's indoor season, which suspected a genuine sub-4 attempt was imminent soon. This was further reinforced when he ran the first ever sub-4 1600 split at the Penn Relays and then ran 4:03 in the mile at the Herbster Classic, setting up shop for the perfect senior year. Coming hot off of a very solid cross-country season, Webb would be entered into an elite mile at the New Balance Games just a month later. This pace was pretty much perfect for a sub-4 attempt, as they'd come through the first quarter in 59.9, halfway in 1:59.9, and came through with 400 to go at almost exactly 3 minutes. Surely enough, the Virginian stud would grit just enough to secure a spot on the list of elite high schoolers, as he would finish the race in third with a time of 3:59.86 on January 20th, 2001.
Second, but he broke the nobody's broken the 4-minute high in how long in high school.
Becoming the first ever high schooler to break 4 minutes indoors and the first in general in over 30 years, Webb knew he had to pull it off during the outdoor season. Taking on top distance stud Ryan Hall at the Arcadia Invitational, this would be Webb's first chance to break 4 not only outdoors, but in a prep field only as well. Sadly, Webb didn't quite have the wheels to do it and would be a little over a second off running 4:01.81. However, he would give it one last genuine shot at the Prefontaine Classic against a crazily stacked field where mile GOAT Isham El Garouge would be present among plenty other world-class athletes. Despite his aggressive racing style, Webb diligently stayed behind everyone else as he was brought through the quarter in 58.5 seconds and was through the half in around 1:58. As he remains contact with the pack and shows no signs of slowing down, Webb begins to take the outside and starts passing elite after another. And as El Garouge wins with a fantastic time, it would be Webb to steal the show with a mark that no one would ever forget that day.
But Allan Webb is putting on a show. He may steal it. Isham El Garouge coming away with this one. Isham El Garouge from Morocco will cross the finish line unofficially 3:49.93. And for Allan Webb, has he done it?
It looks to me like Webb may have gone under 3:55. 3:55.3 is what we're looking at for Jim Ryan's high school record. He's gone well under 4 minutes. Isham El Garouge runs under 3:50 outdoors, the first ever on American soil under 3:50. We're waiting for an official
and now
time.
They're saying maybe 3:53. Is that possible for Allan Webb?
He was on 40. Webb 3:53.40.
He has done it.
Annihilates Jim Ryan's record.
Unbelievable. You know, there's so many people that said the kid could not do it. It's too early in his career. But you put him with the king, Isham El Garouge, who runs a great race at 3:49.
I hung back there, and with 2.5 laps to go, I pulled up with everybody, and then laps to go, I just gave it everything I had.
Well, you ripped it up here, and this crowd went wild. You know, America has been waiting for you. You seem like a really nice guy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Congratulations.
I'd just like to make a shout out to everybody at South Lakes. I love you guys. Woo! I'll be home on Monday. All right.
Allan Webb had run 3:53.43, completely overwriting Jim Ryan's name in the history books as the fastest high schooler in the mile by almost 2 entire seconds. En route to his mile record, he had also dethroned Ryan's 1500 as well, coming through the metric mile in 3:38.26. Despite Webb being the most promising miler ever seen in America, his career trajectory was a bit all over the place, as while he was able to secure national titles in the 1500, on 3 separate occasions, international events would be the Achilles heel for the prodigy. While placement-wise he had never secured anything promising on the big stage, Webb would eventually dedicate his 2007 season to break Steve Scott's American record set back in 1982. Thankfully for Webb, this was a plan that would for once come into full fruition, as his 3:46.91 remains the record 16 years later, and he would retire in 2014 after running the Wanamaker Mile. Łukasz Versbikas is easily the most unique miler on this list, mainly because running wasn't even his primary focus, but rather triathlons. In 2009, Versbikas showed extraordinary talent in the mile running 4:15 indoors and 8:53 for the 2-mile outdoors. To end his year, he became the junior duathlon world champion and shortly after, destroyed everyone at Foot Locker Nationals. Before people knew it, Versbikas had run a 4:04 in the Adidas Dream Mile out of nowhere, already just being seconds from breaking 4. He then placed 4th at the Triathlon World Junior Championships in the fall, won yet another Foot Locker national title just months later, and would soon run 4:03.88 at the New Balance Grand Prix for a big indoor PR. He would also run 14:06.78 for the new indoor 5K record, so at this point in time, his fitness was undoubtedly at an all-time high. After smashing the 2-mile record at the Prefontaine Classic, running 8:29.46, Versbikas would capitalize off of this momentum to return to the Adidas Dream Mile for a proper crack at the Sub-4. The leader took the race out aggressively in 57.68, although everyone would slow down a little too much, as a 64-second lap would have Versbikas behind goal pace, but was still well within range. By 1K, Versbikas presses the pace and impressively brings it back to run a sub-60 lap to hit 1200 at around 3:01. Even though he had a title to defend, Versbikas saw the opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and would just barely become the 5th prep in history to break 4 minutes in the mile. Following his newfound spot on the prestigious Sub-4 list, Łukasz Versbikas would enroll at the University of Oregon, but amidst his cross-country training, would become the world junior champion in the triathlon. As for his cross-country season, he finished in the top 25 at Pac-12s as their 4th guy, and would likely aid them in making it to nationals. In a controversial turn of events though, Versbikas would seemingly last minute forego his collegiate eligibility entirely and announced he'd strictly be focusing on the triathlon to pursue a gold medal for the US, a decision made just before Oregon's regional championships. Winning 2 races in a row, Versbikas' triathlon momentum would come to a crushing halt, as a catastrophic bike accident put him out of commission entirely for months, and his return to the sport was less than favorable by his standards and would eventually cease competition in 2016. While Versbikas was running fast miles, Matthew Moen was just getting his start in 2012. Although primarily a long-distance guy, with no interest for indoor track by 2013, Moen would eventually kick off his sophomore track season with a 4:11 mile at the Portland Track Festival, which was backed up by his mid-350 times in the 15 just weeks earlier. By next year, Moen's dominance had become incredibly prominent with not a single high school loss on his resume, except for the Adidas Grand Prix, where he'd actually wind up running 4:03.23. For his senior year in 2015, he would be entered in his one and only mile within a collegiate field for a genuine crack at the barrier. Sadly, only the highlights are available for this race, but the Oregon native fended off a hefty chunk of the NCAA field to officially become the 6th high schooler to break 4 minutes on May 8th, 2015, running 3:59.38. Moen's career path can be summed up pretty quickly after graduation. He attended the University of Oregon with some pretty decent placements all around, but after an ankle injury and being let go from the team, he's currently pursuing his passion of logging as of 2022, but has done some running in recent times. Grant Fischer's rise to mile fame starts off with his sophomore year. After a very successful outdoor track season with a 4:12 mile PR and a 3:50.1500 at the World Youth Championships, Fischer showed a sub-4 was possible as early as next year. First, he put a clinic on the cross-country scene, winning every meet and a Foot Locker national title, and had his first serious indoor season where he won New Balance Nationals with a 4:09 mile. Fischer mainly ran 1600s in May, but after his formal high school season wrapped up, the Adidas Grand Prix would be the perfect race for him to go under 4. Going up against previously mentioned stud Matthew Moen, a 2:02.17 halfway split would force Fischer to negative split if he wanted to pull it off. And while he certainly did so, he would end up running 4:02.02 to beat Moen, but would have to wait until senior year to give another crack at it. Fischer's next indoor season off of a second Foot Locker national title was more than indicative enough of a under 4 mark, as his 4:03.54 at New Balance Indoor Nationals more or less meant he was immensely close to sub-4 outdoor shape. As every senior thus far has done, Fischer gave in to the adult field at the Nike Festival of Miles. He came through the halfway point in nearly the same time as his dream mile PR, but with a 58.7 third lap this time around. Fischer obviously had more in the tank this time around, and he would close out yet another 58 to become the 7th high schooler in history to go under 4.
The move for Grant Fischer. It's going to be awfully close. He's going to do it, folks. He did it. He did it. He ran exactly the time of Matthew Moen. Can you believe it? 3:59.38 for Matthew Moen, for Grant Fischer.
Fischer's running career at the collegiate level for Stanford would show to be incredibly consistent, but was ripe with close losses after another, as his resume was heavy with second places, but was able to secure at least one NCAA title as a sophomore in the outdoor 5K. His career after turning pro with the Bowerman Track Club exploded Fischer into an international phenomenon, breaking American records and setting some of the fastest marks in history for the indoor and outdoor 5K, outdoor 10K, and is one breakout performance away from grabbing a medal at the World or Olympic Championships. While the last few athletes on this list so far have had similar trajectories with similar times for their sub-4s, Drew Hunter showed perhaps the most promise for the American middle distance scene since Allan Webb. The Loudoun Valley Vikings' start saw impressive range from the 800 all the way to the 3200 his first season. Fast forward to sophomore year, and his times had drastically dropped in every facet and improved his mile by about 25 seconds. By junior year, a New Balance Indoor Nationals title in the 2-mile set the stage for a promising showing at the Adidas Dream Mile, but not without running 4:07 for his season opener at the Penn Relays Carnival. Even though he had run 4:02.36 at the Dream Mile, little did people know Hunter's senior year would be remembered as one of the most prolific senior years in high school history. His cross-country 5K times were absurd from front to back, and it wouldn't be a Sub-4 story at this point without a Foot Locker Nationals title, where he graciously won by 12 seconds. Even though most seniors would use their indoor senior year to build up towards a Sub-4 attempt for outdoor, Hunter began his attempts as early as February at the Armory Track Invitational. His metronomic splits made this a flawless race even with a couple laps to go, and with a 28.8 going into the last lap, Hunter needed just about anything less than a 30 to break 4, but given his stride stayed virtually the same, he would shock himself and the high school running world by running this time instead.
From him as he comes to the line, 20 meters to the good and more. Win in second place, coming through there is for third place. But Chris O'Hare with his hand on the youngster. Boy, oh boy, 3:58.25. The Loudoun Valley boy has smashed 4 minutes.
Drew Hunter's 3:58.25 shattered an Allan Webb record that some might have thought would last a bit longer, but to say Hunter was finished here would be a grand understatement. Just 2 weeks later, Hunter would enter yet another elite mile and would attempt to either lower his record further or to simply break 4 minutes again. The splits are even all the way through yet again, even as far as 3/4 in. But this meant that a PR was likely going to require a sub-58 to beat it for sure. Despite Hunter showing visible discomfort for almost the entire back half, he begins to push his way into third and ends up breaking 4 yet again with a fresh new PR along the way.
Gregoric, Matthews, Awad, and Hunter, and we'll wait for the time for Hunter again. 3:58.25, 3:57.81 as the record falls for the second time in 2 weeks.
Interestingly enough, Hunter's career would continue to draw parallels with Allan Webb's, as he announced his professional career signing with Adidas in July, straight out of high school. He would break 4 in the pre-classic in late May for his first outdoor sub-4, and shortly after his Adidas contract, would run 3:57.15. Depending on how technical you want to be, this last mark doesn't count since he had gone pro, but age-wise he had done so. Unfortunately, Hunter's progress as an athlete didn't live up to the expectations America had put on him, but his 3:34.86 in the 15 and 7:35.85 in the 3K are solid times nevertheless, and at the age of 25, he still has some years to make a world or Olympic team, but it'll be an incredibly difficult task to pull off for him. Washington native Michael Slagowski was practically designed to race the mile, as while he put up respectable performances in other events, his mile stood out by far for his sophomore year, going from a 4:30.1600 to a 3:53.1500, and his 4:15 during his one and only mile for indoor season had Washington running fans unsure how dominant his junior year would be. By the time spring had arrived, Slagowski dropped a wave of promising miles, 2 of which were under 4:10. Fans would likely have to wait another full cycle though, before any promising signs of a sub-4 attempt would be imminent. As early as April 2016 though, he had dropped a massive PR of 4:05.71 at the Pasco Invitational, and 2 weeks later hopped into the Nike Jesuit Twilight Relays to try and run faster. This rainy meet was a high school only field, but it did have a pacer, and he would bring the pack through in a clean 60 for the quarter. Unfortunately, pacing duties would fall off not long after, as a 63 would throw the race out of whack, being a fair bit behind Sub-4. Impressively bringing it back though with a 3 flat third quarter, Slagowski needed just shy of a Sub-60 to bring it all home. And as the umbrella-filled crowd watched in awe regarding what time he'd run, some might not have expected him to become the 9th prep in history to join the elite Sub-4 mile club.
One, Sub-4, he got it! He's in the 3:59, 59:54. Erie in 3 seconds under his.
On paper, every 3:59 high school miler had only broken it once, but impressively enough, Slagowski would find himself in the pre-classic. A race Drew Hunter was also signed up for, but they would be in entirely different heats. While not a PR, he barely cracked 4 by the skin of his teeth again, and was really now part of an exclusive club of kids who broke 4 in and out of a high school environment. He also ran some pretty impressive 800s where he broke 150 every single time, but this is more or less where Slagowski's career ends. After joining the Nittany Lions at Penn State for the 2017 season, injuries would keep him out of racing entirely, and after transferring to Eastern Oregon, he would get a full indoor and outdoor track season under his belt in 2018, but has stopped competing entirely since then. The Southern stud from Southlake, Texas, Reed Brown, entered the scene with very few races his freshman year, but nevertheless became a driving force with a string of sub-16 performances his sophomore season. With a resume of well-rounded times during outdoor, Brown would show tremendous potential that would be reinforced during his indoor roundabout, where he ran 4:16 in early January, but later dropped a big PR going under 4:10 to win New Balance Nationals. Brown raced nearly every mile and 1600 like it was his last, running under 4:10 on 5 separate occasions, with his best being a 4:04.73 at the US Olympic Trials Boys Mile. His senior cross-country season would show to be a Cinderella story, as he didn't win a single major race the entire year, only to come out of the woodwork to win Foot Locker Nationals in 2016. Indoor showed subtle improvements overall, but Brown would begin his true Sub-4 attempts as early as March, where he ran 4:03.23 at the Texas Relays and 4:02.49 in the 1600 at his state championships. Once the conventional high school season ended, Brown gave the mile one final whirl at the Festival of Miles under the lights. The pack would be out a little slow with a 2:02 half, but Brown pulled some moves to put himself as high as second place to prepare for the final lap. 3:02 with about 400 to go is no comfortable spot to be in to run Sub-4, but a calculated kick would not only publish Brown in the Sub-4 books, but would be ranked on the higher end of the list as he came through the line with this time.
Trying to kick hard. He is just gonna do it. He did it. Reed Brown becomes the 10th high schooler all time 3:59.30. Folks, that puts him 4th.
3:59.30 ranks Reed Brown at number 4 on the high school mile list. A fantastic way to end on a high note and to prepare for his collegiate season at the University of Oregon. Brown's NCAA career was pretty consistent, all things considered, on the track side of things, as he would place decently high at competitive meets, helped Oregon win a DMR title, and got his first bronze medal at indoor nationals in the mile. The last time he raced was at the BU Last Chance meet in February 2022, but with a 3:36 1500 PR and only being 24, there might be plenty more in the tank if Brown chooses to pursue a serious career in the sport. Leo Dashbaugh's road to under 4 is a bit unorthodox. The Arizonian up-and-comer had a meteoric rise to mile stardom as he went from a 4:44 1600 to a 4:10 in just 1 year, securing his first state title already too. He had only raced a single time during his junior indoor season, so there wasn't a whole lot of data to go off of. But when he ran 4:07.54 at his state championships, but then ran 4:03.98 at the Brooks PR Invitational, all of a sudden, high school track fans had their eyes on yet another potential sub-4 candidate. Like last year, Dashbaugh raced 1 mile in February, where he ran 4:05.96, but just shortly following his season opener in March, COVID restrictions put a padlock on the track and field gates until further notice. During this time frame, MileSplit would host a virtual meet to keep the high school scene competitive, and during his mile time trial, he would place second overall with a 4:03.07, so the dream was still more than alive. In an attempt to keep kids active, a meet in California would welcome some of the best prep milers in the nation to try and break 4 minutes. The race was advertised as a sub-4 attempt, but a near 2:03 set by the pacer settled the pack a little too comfortably going into the third lap. 3:03.6 was bordering on unsalvageable with 1 lap left, as a low 57 was now required. Dashbaugh's 1:49.800 speed could not have come at a better time, and in the most clutch way humanly possible, he would close in the perfect lap with this time.
Dashbaugh! Keep an eye on the clock! Officially, that is an instant classic. Push share on YouTube, because we got an instant classic. What a show!
3:59.54 marks Leo Dashbaugh as the 11th high schooler on the sub-4 list. Despite the pandemic restrictions halting virtually everyone's athletic endeavors, Dashbaugh would finally get to start racing in March 2021 for his first cross-country season at the University of Washington. With a fantastic performance at Pac-12's his freshman year, this is so far Dashbaugh's best race to date, as his future races haven't quite lived up to those standards yet, but does still have 2 years left to make some magic happen. Born from the exact same city as Allan Webb, the Michiganian native displays more similarities to the early 2000s legend than you may think. Except, it didn't start out that way. Despite his athletic beginnings starting off as a talented climber, Hobs Kessler hopped on the distance train and had cut down his 1600 to 4:26.44 at his state championships. An ill-timed pandemic hot off of a great cross-country season would leave Kessler to train on his own, but he would do a time trial in June 2020 where he ran 4:13 in the 16 and 8:53 in the 32. He had also done a full mile time trial with what were supposed to be pacing duties through 1200 meters, but he decided to finish it last minute and had run a big PR of 4:08. Eventually, Kessler surprisingly found himself at the American League Track 3, a field quite small yet very competitive with nothing but sub-4 talent present. Smartly so, Kessler immediately stayed in the back to run his own race, as the field went out a little fast for him, but he would run near perfect 30-second splits pretty much the entire time. Even with just 200 meters to go, Kessler is at 3:30.42. Meaning that even the slightest of kicks would get him there, but the competitive nature of the race would pull him much further than he or anyone else could have thought, and would send shockwaves across the distance running world with this mark.
To spark Hideli, how much does he have to get home?
Got to swing wide, and he does. Couple of strides between the two of them, and a lean at the line. Hideli's going to get it, though. Very good racing, and yet another sub-4 minute performance. And look at the time by Kessler in third, the high schooler, 3:57.66.
Wow.
both well, do you start to kind of peak outdoors and go, maybe I can take a shot at the outdoor high school record as well?
I still haven't processed the first one, so
he's only been running for 18 months, Otto. He doesn't know anything that's been going on. He just does what he's told by us.
Yeah, I just listen and run fast.
Breaking Drew Hunter's indoor record, Hobs Kessler was now the third fastest high schooler across the distance in general, and he still had an outdoor season to go. His last official personal best was a 4:21 1600, so needless to say, this confused and shocked the minds of many. And even if you knew he ran a 4:08 time trial, it's still a legendary jump in time to make. Kessler did race a mile in April, but didn't do anything spectacular with a 4:14.95. But at the Portland Track Festival, he'd run 3:34.36 out of completely thin air to break Allan Webb's 1500 record. And converted to a mile, this would be a 3:51.51. It was also an under 20 American record, so it didn't come to a surprise that the kid turned pro just weeks later. Kessler's journey had been a bit shaky after his signing, but in recent months has now found his stride once again, running a 7:39 3K indoors and a 3:32.61 1500 outdoors. As of now, he's still considered America's next big thing for the mile at just age 20. So it's no question that USA will be cheering him on every step of the way as he prepares for the World Championships in Budapest. While so far we've taken a look at individual performers, the next 2 years are perhaps the most absurd years for high school milers. And it's only right to group them into one legendary collective to truly encapsulate just how insane this era is. Welcome to the new generation.
To the lead, Colin Salman.
Simeon Birnbaum, the crowd cheering.
In pole position, Gary Martin swaying to the out.
Let's start off with this guy right here, Colin Salman. Newbury Park's very own, was an extraordinary talent from the start, as his sub-16 3-mile times and an insane placement at the densely competitive Cali State Championships instantly stood out among the senior heavy fields he was competing in as just a freshman. Soon enough, he had set one of the fastest freshman miles in history, running 4:16.44, winning the stacked Arcadia Invitational too. His 2019 cross-country season was indicative of an emphatic sophomore year, but due to track season being cancelled in 2020, racing had ceased for him entirely. Salman wouldn't return to full form until spring 2021, where he ran 3 insane miles back-to-back, one of which was a 4:04.86. After setting a jaw-dropping 14:03 5K at the Running Lane Cross Country Championships, Salman knew he was in shape for a quick mile and entered the Dr. Sander Columbia Challenge in 2022. His first quarter is a bit slow, but he quickly makes it up as the laps go on. As with 400 to go, he's hovering around 3:01. Salman, hanging on the outside, eventually finds his groove on the inside lane, and with 200 to go, runs a killer last 200 to go well under the sub-4 mark and well above a chunk of the all-time list for high school miles.
And he is almost there. Is he going to do it? Ladies and gentlemen, sub-4 minute mile for, excuse me, I'm so excited. Colin Salman, schooler. And there he is right there.
While Salman's mark was another amazing addition to the prestigious prep list, the indoor list in general was perhaps the most stacked in high school history, as 9 kids that year were under 4:05 and 7 of them were under 4:03. Not to mention one of them was a sophomore, so it was without question that another sub-4 was going to make way come spring season. All of these kids had begun their attempts to break 4, but none were quite successful just yet. It was still a tad early in the season, to be fair, but in a meet in Pennsylvania, Gary Martin tried to solo a sub-4 attempt after coming through the half in 1:58. the most aggressive start we've seen in quite a while. The third lap split has him through at a confident 2:58, and as the camera catches Martin down the home stretch, he pulls off what is one of the most impressive miles ever seen in high school history.
Just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we've seen a sub-4 minute mile. 3:57.98.
In a completely solo effort, Gary Martin breaks the high school record for the mile in a high school setting only. The last major record had been broken, as Jim Ryan's 3:58.3 back in 1965 had finally fallen at a meet in PA. Naturally, this mark would quickly become revered as one of the most gutsy and impressive ways to run a sub-4 mile. But just as quickly as Martin had received his praise, Salman would immediately take the spotlight once again, as at the Prefontaine Classic, he would lower his already insane time down even further to this.
Time in the world this year.
I just wanted to get in my race and hopefully push for that 3:53. But at the end it was still good. I held on and I ended up passing one person, so it's pretty good.
Of all the great things you've done in this calendar year, senior year, does this feel like the biggest achievement?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Just even being on the start line with those guys, like you just look over, you just see like everyone, like all these professionals, there's like huge names. And just to be on the start line with them is pretty exciting. And so this is definitely a highlight.
Colin Salman now possessed two of the fastest high school miles in history, but the 3:56 was truly in a league of its own, and the fact that it was only May was a scary thought without a doubt moving forward. To further capitalize off of the sheer hype high school miles were getting, the Festival of Miles this year was obscenely packed. Instead of focusing on the high school race, however, some opted to enter the Elite Heat, which had Gary Martin running, and 4:02 junior indoor miler Connor Burns that we saw earlier. The race has two pacers this time around, and a wishful Martin actually leads the field through 58.2, while Burns stays behind coming through in 60. Reminiscent of his last sub-4, Martin would come through the halfway point yet again in 1:58, and Burns came through smack dab at 2 flat. The race is perfectly executed at this point. A mid to high 2:59 with 400 to go gets the crowd roaring, and Martin has the sub-4 in the bag at this point. Burns, however, is kicking arguably harder than anyone else, given how much ground he continued to make up, and with a clear shot at the sub-4, the barrier was no longer a concern, but rather just how fast these two were really going to run.
How fast can Gary Martin go behind him? 3:55 unofficially.
The very start of this race, you could see how he got himself into the lead. He powered through that big sea of action.
For the first time in history, two high schoolers in the exact same race dipped under 4 minutes. Martin snagged a nice PR, and Burns became the second and now fastest junior since Jim Ryan, with a time of 3:58.86. This time around though, instead of people getting a couple weeks to breathe in between such amazing marks, they wouldn't even get more than 24 hours, because another high schooler would go under the barrier, and then 2 weeks later, another junior would end up getting in on the action too.
He does it! He does it! I think it was like 3:57.
4 minutes in the mile. He did it on 4 to 7.
huge final 400. So close at the tape.
Oh my gosh, I want to shut my eyes.
So at this point, things are getting pretty out of hand. Not only did 5 new kids enter the Sub-4 list, but if you look at the results for the Brooks PR Invitational, there are basically 4 more knocking at the door. Cynics at this time were also crediting these newfound marks to be the result of super shoes, and while there is enough research to support that they increase performance by a couple percent, even then it still didn't take away how objectively dense the field was with or without super shoes. Come 2023, the indoor season saw a multitude of Sub-4 attempts to add to their name, the closest being Rocky Hansen, who ran 4 flat 84, and also 401.11 just a week before. During the BU Last Chance invite in late February, Connor Burns would return to the scene once again to join the slightly more obscure club of under 4 indoor milers by running 3:59.11 on February 26th, 2023. The all-time list following New Balance Indoor Nationals would show similar signs to the upcoming spring season, as 6 kids were under 405 and 17 were under 410. Speaking of Hansen, he would test the Sub-4 wheels out as early as April at a collegiate meet in Virginia. A 58 first quarter and a 158 first half was the perfect setup to come through the third lap at exactly 3 minutes flat. At this point, most of the collegiate field is no longer in the running against Hansen, but the thought of him winning the whole meet was more than enough to propel him to inadvertently become North Carolina's first ever Sub-4 prep on April 30th, 2023.
Let's go! Let's go! Yes!
That's going to be close. I think Jack Eliason might have gotten. Rocky Hansen goes 3:59, but he's like, and Jack Eliason gets 3:59.64. There he is, Van Nagel, 3:59.96.
With the bar set so high so early in the season, others would post their mile openers right around or shortly after, and the closest to pull it off again would be Colin Salman, who ran 4 flat 30 at the Oregon Relays. Just a month later though, the Festival of Miles would make way yet again. This time around though, no high schooler would be racing with college or elite athletes. The event attracted so many prolific high school milers that they wouldn't even need elites to race with. They would, however, have pacemaking legend Eric Sawinski that would lead them through the train in a perfect pace in a perfect field that was also more or less in perfect conditions. The race was initially advertised as an Allan Webb record attempt, but this was quickly thrown out the window as Sawinski's actual prescribed pace was a bit more reserved than that through the first lap. A crisp 60 flat leads a majority of the pack in a low 159, and Sawinski does eventually let the kids race it out with 500 to go. A pack of 5 is in genuine contention to break 4, and a 329 with 200 to go dwindles the pack down to 4, with Connor Burns slowly fading away. The rest, however, showed no signs of running any slower than 30 seconds for their last 200, and as a result, the greatest high school mile race in history would come to a close just seconds later.
It's going to be Simeon Birnbaum. He's your winner at the Hoka Festival of Miles.
Strength when it comes to racing. And he also is not afraid to be that cool kid wearing his sunglasses, whether it's indoors or outdoors.
4 high schoolers in a single race went under 4 minutes in the mile, and 2 new additions would be made, with Tanoda Matsatsa and Jackson Heidish going well under. This race was the most emblematic showing of the future of American middle distance running. As for the future of all of these kids, Colin Salman is currently enrolled at Northern Arizona University. His freshman year hasn't quite lived up to the expectations of those who maybe thought he'd be making more waves in the NCAA world, but he did run a massive 800 PR going sub 147 in April, showing that the collegiate environment might just need some more adapting before he's in top form for his sophomore year. Gary Martin went to the University of Virginia to also have a pretty solid freshman year as a mile PR, 339 1500, and a 147 800 definitely shows some promise as he goes into his sophomore year. Reinhard Harrison kinda disappeared after his sub-4 mile. He enrolled at the University of Oregon, but the only time he's been seen competing so far was to be a pacemaker at the Oregon Twilight Meet. As for the upcoming class that will soon join the NCAA world, Simeon Birnbaum will be heading to the University of Oregon, Connor Burns will also be joining Birnbaum, Rocky Hansen to Wake Forest, Tenoda Matsatsa committed to Georgetown, and Jackson Heidish will be heading to Duke to join the Blue Devils for the class of 2027. As it currently stands, 20 high schoolers have run a mile in less than 4 minutes, and Allan Webb's 3:53:43 remains the record over 30 years later. It took over 30 years for anyone to break 4 after Jim Ryan did back in 1964, but since 2020 alone, half the list is comprised of athletes that have done so. Some went on to have pretty phenomenal careers, some perhaps not as much, and for some we're about to see which side of the coin they'll be on soon. Regardless, all of these athletes share a page of a book that's still being written, and as the American scene continues to revere and celebrate such an accomplishment, it's very likely we'll continue to see this trend go further, as long as the right talent shows up with the right mindset to pull it off. This has been the history of the Sub-4 high school mile, and thanks for watching. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel, and if you want to support the channel for more track and field content like this, come on over and become a patron, drop a sub, and check out my other links below. I'll see you on whatever video I upload next, and take care.